they're all free clothes. Like, all my jewelry was given to me, like, back then. Like, so many times I was just on zero when I was traveling, and I was just praying to fucking God that the sponsorship would come in.
I am not going to trivialize the importance of Essena O'Neill. I think she's really quite important in the history of veganism, history of vegan activism. I would go so far as to say that if I were going to write a book about vegan activism in my lifetime, vegan activism for my generation, you could start chapter 1 with Essena O'Neill. I mean that. And you could talk about the turning point where, look, in the past, we had these examples like PETA, people for the ethical treatment of animals. In the past, we had people like Gary Francione. And then, something special happened around the time Essena O'Neill came on YouTube, where there was this concept of lifestyle activism. There was this model of the permanent vacation, of people flying around the world and going to the beach in bikinis and getting millions of views. People like Essena O'Neill and Freely started to change the game. And they changed the game for the worse. And then they burnt out and were personally and publicly broken and humiliated and wept on camera. And then the game began to change again into what it is we have now. Essena O'Neill is not a trivial person, at least not on the Picayune scale by which we measure out the importance of things in vegan activism.
I was a broke-ass bitch. Like, you think I looked rich. Like, I was like... they're all free clothes. Like, all my jewelry was given to me, like, back then. Like, so many times I was just on zero when I was traveling, and I was just praying to fucking God that the sponsorship would come in and I'd have $300 for, like, through the next few days.
So this is an important misperception or misconception. There were young women all over the world who dropped out of university. There were young women who dropped out of high school in order to imitate Essena O'Neill. And of course, I talked to people who dropped out of university or dropped out of high school to imitate Freely, another early adopter of the permanent vacation lifestyle. And of course, all of them assumed that if they followed in these footsteps, they'd be living in relative wealth and relative luxury. And what she's saying to you here is, no, she was living in a kind of poverty and desperation.
So the money question is a big issue, obviously. You accepted donations, which were supposed to go to your future content creation. And then obviously you closed down the website and didn't go through with all of that. So some people say that you basically stole money from people. You're a scammer. So can you explain what happened with the money that people donated?
Why isn't Klaus at Plant-Based News following up on this story? Do you guys remember this? Klaus made a completely fictitious story accusing me of doing what Essena O'Neill actually did. So this is an example of a real fundraising controversy in the vegan movement that we should all pay attention to and all learn from. And there was a phony, contrived, fake fundraising controversy. There were false allegations made against me. And for some reason, the free press, such as it exists in the vegan movement, they were on the wrong side of the controversy that involved me, and it seemed like there was very little interest in holding Essena O'Neill accountable when she walked away with $10,000.
Right? I find it so funny, right? There's this, like, 18-year-old girl crying about body image, crying about that, like, it's shitty that I, like, was selling all these, like, hot clothes off my hot body, and maybe that cycle isn't good for young people. That's kind of what I...
Let's be clear. Being a leader in the vegan movement is a position of moral authority. Yes, Essena O'Neill was someone who wore a bikini, and her fame partly derived from that. But the position she adopted was one that required her to be morally impeccable, especially when asking for donations for a charitable purpose. Right? There's an onus on her to demonstrate that she's not just using the donations to pay her rent, that the donations are being used for some positive purpose, such as she promised to her viewers.
I felt I was feeling back then. So the irony that everyone's like, she's stealing all this money. Like, I was like, holy shit, like, I needed money for rent. Like, I could not, there's no way to say it other than I didn't feel safe with where I lived, where I was. I just came back from LA. My family dynamics were insane. It was a very alienating, intense time for me in my personal life. So,
Be that as it may, the donors were supporting a charitable purpose, and that's not what the money was spent on. As she said just there in passing, she spent the money on her own rent.
I think a lot of people have this idea that you scammed everyone, like you accepted all this money and then did nothing for it. So I think that's a big question.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt as well. So it was about 10 grand I got given, which I thought was amazing and insane. And for me, that was a lot of money, and that was amazing. But as soon as I felt like I couldn't create content, and I just lost all trust in who I was and what I was doing, and yeah, maybe I'm just being emotional and scamming people. Maybe that's who I really am, you know? So
I think it's worthwhile to just pause and reflect on what she just said. To her, it's a joke. I think for all of us, reflecting on our own lives, reflecting on how we use social media, whether as content creators or as viewers, I think it's not a joke. I think it's not a laughing matter. Let me just say, still right now, I'm in a position to ask for donations. There have been various projects I've proposed in the past, but if I were to ask for donations, I would then hold myself to a very high standard in pursuing those objectives and reporting to the public on where the money had gone. And something as simple as publishing a book, once you take on that responsibility, that you're not gambling with your own money, you're gambling with other people's money. You have to hold yourself to a standard that is above reproach.
I just panicked. I donated about half of it, just random charities. I'm sure you can look them up. It was out of panic.
What was that? So she paid her rent and she donated about half of it to just random charities? Sorry. When people gave you $10,000, they weren't choosing to donate to random charities, right? If right now, if I ask my audience to donate some money so I can publish a book, I have to take that money and give it to the printing press, spend it on a list of things. Maybe I have to pay an illustrator to illustrate the cover. It's going to be a series of things related to publishing the book, right? It doesn't solve the problem morally or ethically. If I say, I didn't publish the book, but about half of the money went to random charities. Your audience can donate to random charities themselves. This is holding yourself accountable by the wrong standard.
I just wanted to do the right thing. Looking back, I wish I would have just figured out how to refund, but I'm sorry, I was just so fucking dumb. It was just, I just wanted it to be over. I think I just panicked, and I was just like, okay, donate. And then because I could only do a certain amount a day, I ended up seeing a therapist, and I was talking to her about it, and she was like, look, that's just you're just giving money away to charities. Maybe you could just go away for 3 weeks, clear your head. So then I volunteered in Cambodia. So many sleepless nights where I've just been, I'm never going to be able to pay those people back.
Running away from your problems by doing volunteer work in Cambodia.
I live paycheck to paycheck. So that's why I'm really passionate about UBI and social services, because I think it could be easier for everyone.
Were you ever tempted to come back to social media? And what did you miss most after you left?
Besides from the insane pleasure of earning money like that, number one, money, of all things, of course. No, it's working minimum wage and then getting paid to promote a cute vegan product. It's different. It's a different life. There was something so special about what I had online, and I just want it again. And it sucked because also, and it's uncomfortable to talk about, but I feel like the people in my life then, they had a certain point of view, and my point of view was different, and I felt so alone and alienated, and I was crazy, and a few people did say that to me, and I think that hurt me a lot, and that was my silencing. After I thought someone was like, you're not okay, you need serious help, and I wasn't okay, so I think that was abundantly clear. That hurt. I don't know, that really hurt me, and that just made me feel so shameful that I'd embarrassed my family, that I'd just been making a fool of myself, that I just, that stuff should have been saved for therapy, and it's been 4 years, and I can I'm thankful it happened. I can't regret things, but everything with the money and just it was a mess. I was just trying to have a little blog and not do sponsorships, and what it blew up to was just all too much for me. And yeah,
I've been doing this thing on YouTube for more than 5 years, talking about history, politics, sometimes about veganism. I don't recommend other people do it. Some people are cut out for this, and some are not. And people sometimes talk to me and say they're uncomfortable with their own body. They have issues related to anorexia and weight loss. They are uncomfortable with their own face. They're uncomfortable with the sound of their own voice. When they record videos and hear it back, they can't stand it. This ain't for you. And you know, Essena O'Neill and her rise to fame had a lot to do with her being very lean and wearing a bikini. There wasn't a whole lot in the bikini, but really showing off her midriff, showing off how thin she was all the time. And when she broke down, when it all fell apart for her, she did have reflections about how this obsession with weight loss, not quite anorexia, but having her whole life revolve around this was one of the sources of stress and sorrow and of, struggling to be as beautiful as you can be, or maybe more beautiful than you can be for the sake of the lens. Look, guys, what I'm doing right now is not motivated by money, and it's not motivated by the number of viewers, right? I'm coming on camera and talking about things that I really think are meaningful as an end in itself. If I've got something to say about politics of Vietnam, politics of Afghanistan, or the politics of some internet personality, if I think that what I'm saying is meaningful and I want to share it on the record, then that is an end in itself. So I don't suffer from these other things. But Essena O'Neill, there's another real cautionary fable here. And she thought the money would never end. And she thought her looks would never fade. And now here we are, just a few years later, partly looking back at the train wreck of a career of Essena O'Neill, and partly looking back at the train wreck of the vegan movement, and partly looking back and looking forward at social media and what it means for people like me and what it means for people like her who decide to sacrifice our privacy, putting things on the internet that can very simply prevent you from getting even the humblest of jobs. What I do on YouTube could prevent me from getting a job at Starbucks.
I'm definitely not a perfect vegan. I have eaten cheese and dairy ice cream a handful of times. It was delicious each time. Most of the time I was drunk. I'm saying that just to say that I used to be a real perfectionist online. I think that's something I really critique a lot now is kind of like, I don't know, I always had I always just had this like image to like uphold to, or like there was always like this person in my head telling me like what was right and wrong all the time. And 4 years later, I reckon that's just boring. I reckon perfect people aren't fun to hang around. I studied English Lit and political science just for a year, which I loved. I learned so much, fell in love with Karl Marx, alienation.
Okay, is there anything else you want to add to the end of this video?
I'm terrified of the internet, but I think I'm a lot more sure of like who I like, who I trust, and I think that makes your personality more than just like other things. I don't know, that sounds really bad way of explaining it.
Your looks don't last. Essena O'Neill, her career was based on her appearance, her so-called beauty, and her looks didn't last. In general, with human beings of any gender and any age, we can say your looks don't last. If you're an exception to the rule, still, looking ahead to the future, that's not something you should count on. What you should count on is building your career, building your reputation, whether on social media or otherwise, on something meaningful, on something durable. Being a person of character, being a person of substance, being a person of real moral integrity. Essena O'Neill, the internet did hand you an opportunity to earn a lot of money by wearing a bikini. It handed you an opportunity to travel all around the world on permanent vacation and live the very peculiar life that you did. But it also handed you an opportunity to be a leader in the vegan movement. For a little while, you were. And you could have taken that opportunity to develop yourself intellectually. You could have taken that opportunity to really hold yourself to a very high standard morally, as a person of integrity, as a person who was a leader of sorts in a political movement of sorts. And you didn't do that. You got instead on the road to self-indulgence and self-adulation, and you're still living in that self-centered way when your looks and your fame are gone and can never be recovered. The life of the mind doesn't last forever. But I'll tell you something. I look forward to being 70 years old because I look forward to what I'm going to be able to do with my mind as an author and an intellectual when I'm in my 70s.